Hello everybody, it's Mr. Zoeller, and today I wanted to go over the executive branch of our U.S. Constitution with everybody today. So as you can see on your screen, the executive branch has to deal with the President of the United States. So let's find out about what the job and role of the President is today. So first off, to run for President, there are a few requirements you must meet according to the U.S. Constitution. So first, you must be born in the United States, must be a natural-born citizen. You must be at least 35 years of age. You must have lived in the United States for 14 years. And then some additions to the Constitution later on. In the 22nd Amendment, it limits a president to only serving a two-term limit, so they can only be elected basically 2 times. And then in the 25th Amendment, it states that if the president dies while in office, then the vice president takes over. So how do we elect the president? So most people would normally think that the president is based off of the popular vote, so whoever gets the most votes wins and becomes president, but that is not the case. So the president is elected through what's called the Electoral College, and so we as American citizens, we don't actually directly elect the president. Instead, we are voting for the electors in a state. So in other words, kind of how it works is that whoever receives the most popular votes in a state, that candidate, whoever got the most votes, receives all of that state's electoral votes. And the number of votes that a state has, electoral votes, is based off of how many members they have in Congress. So every state has at a minimum 3 electoral votes because every state has 2 senators and every state has at least 1 member in the House of Representatives. For California, we are the largest state in population. We have the most representatives in the House of Representatives. So we have a total of 55 electoral votes because we have 2 senators from our state and we have 53 members in the House of Representatives. So it's a winner-take-all system. So if in an election, if candidate A receives 1 more vote than candidate B, then candidate A would get all 55 electoral votes. So it just depends on who gets the most votes in the state. They get all the electoral votes of that state. For the most part, there's some states that have different rules, but for the most part, that's what most states have. And then to win the presidential election, the Electoral College, it is whatever candidate receives a majority, so over 50%, of all of the electoral votes. And so for most elections, it's been decided that way. And in other elections where we have like more than 2 candidates, like major candidates receiving electoral votes in many states, if there is no winner after the election is over, so nobody received over half of the electoral votes, then the vote goes to the House of Representatives. And so that's happened a few times in our history. So taking a look here at the previous election in 2016, you can see the counties here, how they voted. And the counties that are red were the ones that voted for Donald Trump for the Republican Party, and those that were in blue were the ones that voted for Hillary Clinton from the Democratic Party. So you might see on here, yeah, there's a lot of red everywhere, but remember that in certain counties, in certain areas, there's a much higher population. So once again, as I was mentioning, in a winner-take-all system, it's just whoever wins a state, whoever gets the most votes in the state gets all of their electoral votes. So for a campaign, when they're running for president, it's really smart for them to kind of figure out, like, where do they have an advantage, where do they need to travel and talk to, because you might have a state, where a candidate might have like 3 or 4 million more votes than somebody else, but even if they had like 10 more votes, they would still get the same amount of electoral votes. So it's kind of like you had extra votes, but they weren't really needed, I guess. Okay, so if you're elected president, what are some of the jobs that you have? So some of them are that you nominate judges to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's one of the really important ones because once a justice is on the Supreme Court, they get to have that for life. You get to pardon criminals who have broken the law. So a president can pardon somebody from in a state for any laws that they have broken. They are allowed to make treaties with other countries as long as it is approved by the U.S. Senate. The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, which means that the president is in charge of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Marine Corps, in charge of all of that. The president can create a cabinet of advisors, and so these people would give advice to the president and help him do his job of enforcing laws across the United States, because one person enforcing all the laws in all 50 states would be quite a big task. So you have different members of the cabinet. And then the other one is that the president gets to decide on laws. So the House and Senate will send the president a proposed law. It's called a bill. and the president can either sign it into law or the president can veto it, which means he or she is rejecting that proposed law, that bill. There are some limits to the president, to the executive branch. So if a president does veto a bill from the Congress can override the veto if 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate approve that bill. Then it would override the president's veto. The Congress can also issue articles of impeachment against a president and other officials in the government for misconduct and remove him or her from office. So over our history in the United States, we have had 3 presidents that have been charged with impeachment. So they're charged with it, but all 3 were found not guilty, so none were removed from office. So Andrew Johnson down here was the very first one, and we'll learn about him later on when we get to the Civil War in class. We had President Bill Clinton. So as I said, these were all found not guilty. And then we have President Trump, the most recent one last year, who was charged with impeachment but found not guilty. So the other president I have here was never formally charged with impeachment. So this is President Nixon, Richard Nixon. But the House of Representatives was getting ready to issue articles of impeachment against him, but he ended up resigning. So he actually stepped down and quit as president of the United States. So he's the only one that's ever done that. And the whole purpose of this is to make sure that the president, this one person who has a lot of power, doesn't have too much power. They're not like a king, so there are limits to what they can do. So hope that helps you guys learn more about the president of the United States, and feel free to ask questions if you need to know more. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.